Every now and then, Venerable Children will ask us, if doubt visits the mind, what teaching do you have unshakable faith in? So it's the go-to one. And I've always been very clear about the one that works very well for my mind, and it's the 8 types of dukkha. Those, you don't need any sophisticated philosophical understanding to get those. Birth, aging, sickness, death, meeting with what we don't like, not obtaining the things we like, even though we try so hard to get them, and having a body and mind under the control of afflictions and karma. It's pretty straightforward. Those come easily. They come every day. So I've noticed over time that I'm sadly an expert at increasing the suffering that naturally comes, because in certain situations I simply cannot accept what's going on. I can't. And I've noticed now that that kind of mental approach brings me more suffering, more mental suffering than anything else that I've ever experienced, ever. So if this particular teaching is a benefit to you and it can save you from extra suffering, I remember years ago when I first was getting to know Venerable Children, she turned to me, we were walking somewhere, doing something, and out of the blue she said, I'd really like you to experience less suffering than what you're doing to yourself currently. And I just looked at her and I thought, good. Yeah, I'd like that too, but I just did not get what she was talking about. I'm slowly getting it. I don't have it all right now because I notice now that I'm still in this same pattern of something comes up. It might be quite big. It usually is the big ones. And then I'm just caught in this state of rejecting reality, is what it boils down to. Now, this has to be done with some wisdom, too. It's not the case where, let's say I take the car into Spokane, I'm in a parking lot, and then someone rams the car, just because they want to, because they have a big truck, and then I just say, that's fine. I can accept this. I'll pay for the damage that you've done to the Abbey car. It's not like that, right? It has to have some wisdom. And then it's always good, with this particular Lam Rem topic, to always check in and review what conclusion we should be arriving at when we do this kind of reflection and meditation. So it's not like we're trying to become a doormat or just, let's bring on the suffering, it'll just help purify something, not sure what. But it's really to help us see that this is the situation that we're in samsara, and to develop this determination to be free from this. And so we're talking about, in some cases it's called renunciation, to want to get out of this mess. So in thinking about this rejection of suffering, there's a beautiful passages in volume 6 of the Library of Wisdom and Compassion that talks specifically about the fortitude of voluntarily accepting suffering. Voluntarily accepting it, and all the benefits that come from this. But I thought I'd start with a very tangible example of how I tortured myself in the past. And this topic started when I was really in the early, even before I was really seriously involved with the Dharma. But it's a situation that we'll all encounter, and we'll encounter it ourselves at some point. But I learned years ago that a very dear cousin of mine learned about the fact that she actually had stage 4 cancer. Things were not going right in her body, but she discovered really, really late in the game about how far advanced the cancer was. And she, at the time, had 2 children. She was a musician. Her life was on full. She was very talented. Everything in that moment in the samsara world was working for her. And she had just moved back from Paris to be in Calgary, Alberta, where her parents were. And, life was going to just charge ahead with her husband and her raising her kids in Canada. And then all of a sudden she discovers stage 4 cancer. And so, what I went through in trying to support her, and I did. I was, at the time, living in Edmonton. I was driving down to Calgary and just spending time with her. especially in the last year. It's this thing that happens called personal distress. So because I couldn't accept the fact that, our bodies are impermanent, hers is too, I couldn't accept the fact that she was going to leave this life. There was tremendous suffering. And so, when we're in personal distress, we are not much benefit to the person that we're trying to help. So I did my best to try and disguise it and hide it. But, there's certain things that we know with people that we're close to that people just pick up on. And so for a little while, it was my cousin taking care of me, right? In very subtle ways, but she was picking up on the fact that this was very disturbing to me. And so that's just an example of how, not accepting reality brings such tremendous mental pain. And so I'm going to go to the book. I'm going to do a number of talks on this topic just to give, examples and then come back to the benefits of accepting suffering with wisdom, not with just like, okay, bring it on. So His Holiness and Venerable Children say, physical and mental pain will arise in our lives. It's a natural occurrence for beings like us in samsara. So yes, we all understand that intellectually. I get it. But I see I haven't gotten it any deeper than an intellectual understanding. All these 8, I go, yes. And it actually is a relief to know about these 8. Even on an intellectual level, knowing what these 8 are, it's sort of like a relief to know that you're not a total failure, right? Because before meeting the Dharma, I thought I was a total failure. Why is my life unfolding like this? Why am I not successful? All of those questions that come up when you don't accept the fact that birth, aging, sickness, death will come, not getting what we want, getting what we don't want, all of that. Just intellectual. But it's a relief to know what's going on. So they continue, there's no escaping it. It's possible to willingly and even happily bear suffering. Now, we've all done that in our samsaric pursuits, right? Think of all the suffering that you went through to get the papers in on time, pulling all-nighters. Think of what you've done to get the person of your choice. I've done crazy things, and they weren't all easy. Think of the things you've done to promote your career. Maybe working 60 or 80 hours a week. We're willing to bear suffering to get these samsaric goals, right? So we know how to do it. They go on to say, for example, a woman in labor willingly bears the pain because she wants the baby. Now, friends of mine who have had children have told me this. And they say, and this is across the board, I've heard them all say this, had I remembered what the pain of childbirth was the first time, I would not be doing this the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth time. Whatever, had I remembered. Or someone who is ill voluntarily bears injections or even surgery, knowing that it'll bring about healing. We have the capacity to bear suffering patiently without becoming angry or resentful, because we know that doing so will prevent future suffering and will enable us to progress on the path to awakening, a state free from all dukkha whatsoever. So I'll give another example, and I'll speak more about this example in the next BBC I give about this. But then, of course, I get through losing my cousin and all of that and getting coaching from Venerable Children about grief. So grief is, a normal state of things, and we need to go through that. But then, of course, the next situation arises where a few years later, not one of my parents, but both of them developed dementia. And that period of time, I just labeled the hell realm. It was a total hell realm. Now, there were moments of clarity when I let go of this grasping and just wanting to cling to the way my parents were before the disease started. But once the disease started, I was just in the grip of seeing what they were losing and seeing what our family was losing. And in their moments of clarity, seeing the pain of their loss, knowing that they were losing their mental capacity. But there were moments, and I remember this clearly, and this is what is very helpful to remember, when I could let go of that mind that was just rejecting what was going on with both of them, then I could just be with them, and there are moments, certain days, where they were very clear. And there were other days when they were very confused. But, in both of those places, when I wasn't just clinging with all my might to wanting them to be different, then we could have this very relaxed time, that was joyful. So His Holiness and Venerable go on. Usually we think that suffering has no benefit at all. However, although we definitely should not deliberately bring misery to ourselves, note that one, when it does arrive unasked for, contemplating its benefits helps us to avoid increasing our suffering by falling into anger and despair. So that's a very critical sentence to end on. We don't have to jack up our own personal suffering when suffering is already happening. With this mind of acceptance, with wisdom, then we can move through this without the added burden of being really, really upset. And then, we're not helping the people that we're with. Okay, more next time.